I've created an AI automation that's going to save me over 100 hours this year alone. And it helps me stay on top of trends and news so I always know what's going on in my industry. And if you copy this, you can also stay on top of your industry no matter what your profession is. So one way I keep up to date in the AI space is I subscribe to a bunch of daily AI newsletters. But only a small fraction of the stories that are in those newsletters are actually relevant to me and what I'm looking for. I'm looking for only the most relevant news to AI and online businesses. It's like finding needles in haystacks every single week, and it's super time consuming, which is exactly why I created this automation. By the way, this is a recording I did for my Skool community called the AIFI Lab, which is a community of online entrepreneurs who are learning how to use AI in their business to work less and profit more. If you want to join us inside the community, there's a link in the description below the video here. So these are examples of relevant headlines, and then these are examples of irrelevant headlines. So we want to use these to help train the AI of the types of things that we are looking for and the types of things that we are not looking for. So as you might imagine, this is the trickiest part of this whole setup, is that it gets it right, if you will. And as you can see here, there's a whole bunch of different examples. I won't use all these examples. I'll probably use, I don't know, 6 to 8 each and just see how it does. Yesterday, I just went in and just basically re-logged back into Zapier. All I did was I just created the first step, which is new labeled email. Because I have that folder in Gmail, and these emails that I want to be filtering automatically go into that folder, I figured that that's one place I can start. So all I did here is, this is the trigger in Zapier. If anybody uses Make, it's the same thing. Me personally, I prefer Zapier, but I know a lot of people who use Make and really like it. It tends to be a little too technical for me, so that's why I like Zapier. Anyway, the trigger is when new emails come into AI newsletters, and if we continue with the selected record. So now we want to add the next step into this process. So this is where I think I want to add ChatGPT. So I'll take ChatGPT. So the event here is, I'm creating conversation, basically. This is where we're using ChatGPT within Zapier, and we need to fill out some of these fields. So the user message here is basically, what do we want the prompt working with? And all that means is I want the prompt to be referencing the emails that come into that folder. So new labeled email, yes, but I want it to look at the body of the email. I don't necessarily care about, I will have it report the name of the newsletter and the date, but right now, all I want it to do is I want it to look at the body. So I'm looking through here. Okay. Oh, body plane. One of you saw that and was like, Rick, you totally missed it. And I just want to reiterate, you all, like, I am not a technical person. So, and you all are probably far more technical than I am. And just keep that in mind as you're going through these things. I'm going to use GPT 4.0 for this. Memory key, I don't need anything there. I don't need an image. Username, I don't care what your name is. Or I don't care that I put my name in here. Assistant name. And so assistant instructions, this is our, so I use Cassidy a lot. What I did, because I wasn't sure exactly how to describe what I wanted it to do, you know, which we run into a lot, right? Like, we kind of have an idea of what we want it to do, but like, it's like, how do we articulate that? So all I told it, so I have, by the way, I have an assistant in here that I believe I rebuilt for you all, that is in the lab. And it's just the ChatGPT prompt engineering assistant. You put a problem in and it'll write the prompt for you. So that's in the lab. And I'm using the exact same version just within Cassidy here. So here's what I wrote. I have a Gmail filter set up where I get about 8 emails per day. I'm basically just reiterating what the problem is and what I want it to do. And so I say, I want to create a prompt that can analyze these daily emails and, based on specific criteria, give me a daily report of only those stories, headlines, and tools. I will include examples of both relevant and irrelevant stories, headlines, and tools within this prompt. And then it just literally within 3 seconds wrote me this entire prompt. So within Cassidy here, you can just say add to editor, and this part over here is the editor. Now, this is where I get to kind of review the prompts that it wrote. And what's going to be super important here is to make sure that I'm very clear on the criteria for relevance. And so let's do that now. Okay, so your sophisticated AI assistant for the role, that's great. I don't need it to have, I mean, I could further that a little bit and add a characteristic of knowledge of online business with deep and wide knowledge of online businesses and AI. So I'm just making that up. So we'll see what that does. So your task is to analyze daily emails from a Gmail folder. So it just basically reiterated what I told it. So context, you receive approximately 8 emails daily. Each email contains various stories. You'll use examples of both relevant and irrelevant. So I don't know that I necessarily need that per se, but I'll keep it in here for now. So the steps, I don't need these specific steps for where I'm telling it to access the Gmail folder, because I can say retrieve the emails in, and then in Zapier, I will be grabbing the name of the folder in Gmail and putting it right there. So extract content, identify and extract AI stories from each email, generate a report, compile a report containing only relevant stories. So that's another thing. I told it I wanted to compile a report. I don't really know what I want that report to look like. So I think the steps are pretty good. So the constraints. So criteria, specificity, you must adhere strictly to the relevance, create criteria provided, ensure that extracted content is accurate, only include content from the last 24 hours. Criteria for relevance. So this is where the more detailed you can be, the better. But I'm going to start off with fairly broad criteria to see if it catches it, along with the examples. Analyze daily emails. So see up here in the context section, because I was getting down to the examples part, and the examples part combined with the criteria is most important, because this is what's telling it what we want it to do, or the types of stories we want it to pull. And so I didn't remember earlier in the prompt, like how did we prominently ask it to use the examples? We put it in the context, and I'm going to just move that up into the task itself. So based on specific criteria, you'll generate a daily report that includes only relevant stories, headlines, and tools. You will use examples of both relevant to filter content effectively. So I kind of like that placement better. Constraints, criteria. So all I did for criteria, by the way, is so for stories, focus only on stories that have relevance to AI as it pertains to online businesses. I'm going to put a constraint in here also. Do not, or I would say I am not interested in e-commerce businesses or physical products. So I would say when you give a report or thought process relevant information as to why are giving me, or why you are making the decisions you are. Anyway, so headlines, focus only on headlines related, focus only on tools that have relevance to AI as it pertains to online businesses. Okay, so this is examples of relevant stories, headlines, and tools. So I'm going to go back. So these are ones that we've grabbed. And so I'm just going to do a quick scan and pick out, just even though that these are the ones that we've used in our examples of relevant headlines, I'm going to try to pick out, 6 to 8 that I think are really good. So Notebook LM. And the idea here with this is we're basically telling it, we want to give it examples of where it would be like, I wouldn't have chosen that, but I'm telling it, hey, this is a relevant example. Now, we don't have any relevant tools in our list, which is totally fine. So basically what I'm going to do here is just remove this, and I'm going to add that in here and just go back and forth. Here's my prompt. So I would say the other thing that I'd want it to include probably is the date from the newsletter, which is easy to grab in Zapier. Retrieve the emails, extract content, generate report. I could say, so I'm back up in the steps under, so either one, generate report, format for clarity. I can just say, I also want you to include the relevant date from or for each news headline, and only the relevant whenever applicable. Also include a URL to the, I'm just gonna basically just copy this again. Also include a URL to the relevant, yeah. So here's the prompt I'm gonna start with. So this is where it's like, I think it's pretty good criteria. Let's find out. So I'm basically just going to, yes, there's that part at the top there. I'm basically just pasting that entire thing. And thankfully it kept nice spacing. The only thing I'm going to add to this, because it didn't bring the formatting over, is I'm just going to add the markdown. So notice that I put H2 as criteria for relevance, but then within that, I have the example section. So I'm going to mark that as like an H3 because that's really important. But by giving it 3 number signs, I'm basically saying, hey, this is important, but it's within the H2 above. I'm going to add that third one here. So there's the prompt. Here's the data. So your task is to analyze the actual body of the email. I don't know if I need this, but I'm going to save it just in case I want to come back to it. I'm just going to throw it in my doc here. In this case here, because it's not circling back to the entire folder. It's actually going email by email. So I can remove these 2 here. And what I'll say is instead, I will say steps, view, and then this is where I want that email again, apply criteria. So step 1, very simple, review the body of the email. Number 2, apply criteria, evaluate each story, headline, and tool against the specified relevance criteria. I also want to make sure that we're actually using the same language throughout. Yeah, criteria for relevance. Okay. So I think this is done. Max tokens, I'm going to bump this up to 1,000. Max tokens is essentially size of the output that'll give you. So 250 is pretty limited. I want to give it a broad scope from which to work. Temperature. So this is just a reminder when prompting it, temperature is between 0 and 2. 0 is, think of it as more specific. You just want it to do what you want it to do. Whereas 2, the higher the number, it's getting more creative. It can take into its own liberties when giving you an answer. I don't want any of that. So I want 0 in my temperature. Send the conversation. So I'm going to test the step. And while it's doing that, I'm going to set, all right, so basically all it's telling you is that it sent the prompt. It found the email, it sent the prompt to ChatGPT. Now we need to get the output, right? So that's where the next step comes in. And so data out. So it is giving us information in here. So I'm looking at Microsoft and Google want to bring ads to their AI search results. I would take that. That's good. Brave browsers, Leo AI assistant now uses real-time search results. I'm looking at that. I don't know what Brave browser is, but I'm also not unhappy that it grabbed that. I probably wouldn't use it. Global audiences, again, this is probably like, I'm not interested in this, but I'm also not terribly upset that it grabbed this. So my next step would probably be that I want this output into just a Google Doc that my team and I have access to that will just update itself during the day and through the week so that I can see this again and to begin to troubleshoot it a little bit more clearly. I'm simply going to add a step here of send this to Slack. So choose event. I'm going to send channel a message. There's my account and continue and channel. And I should have one, yeah, for Rick to review. Message text. You can write literally anything you want in here. Hey, I got something here you might like. So this is where we want to include from the dropdown here, the output from the previous step. So username, no, assistant name, no. So we're looking for the reply right here. So this is what we want. And so, hey, I got something for, and it has that message. And I'll test it here in a second and I'll show you. Send as a bot name. I don't care about any of that. Anything else? Cool. Click on test step and it says a channel message was sent. So I'm going to go over to Slack, go to for Rick to review. Here it is. Okay. What it's giving me here is as you can see here, relevant stories, relevant tools, relevant news. I don't know what the difference is between stories and news. However, let's see. So OpenAI wants to become for profit. We don't care about that. So any of these stories, right? These top three, I don't care about. This for me is interesting, but it's pretty technical and not relevant for most online businesses. Now, relevant tools, I'm actually pretty happy with the tools that it gave me. What we would do is probably look at that email and just make sure that what it's giving is not a sponsored tool. Now, with the relevant news, this is what we saw earlier, and I'm not unhappy that it gave me these news stories. Again, out of these three, I would say I would include number 2. I would capture number 2 and we would use that. So it's also helpful to see their thought process, right? So let's go back over to the Zap and the output. So exclusion of irrelevant content, stories and tools related to physical products, e-commerce without a direct AI. So it's interesting that it included those because it's interesting that that's the only thing that it's including in its thought process for why or what it deemed irrelevant. So since it included the 3 top stories about like NVIDIA's whatever that Jumbotron or whatever it was, not Jumbotron, I'm going to go back into the prompt and re-look at the prompt and probably make a change. So I would say I'm going to make a reference to the examples right here, criteria, so under constraints. Yeah, I'm going to put that right in here. I would say I'm going to put it in quotes as a guideline for what I am looking for. I don't know if it's gonna be enough, and then I'm just gonna copy the exact same thing and then just say, use examples of or irrelevant stories as a guideline for what I am not looking for. So I'm just gonna give them like little bullet points here. Probably don't need them, but again, I do like to try to keep things clean within the prompt. The other thing I'll do is I'm gonna take the example that it gave in the output and include it in irrelevant. So just because it gave, like this is directly relevant to what it gave me. And I'll just grab the one more video and then so this is just basically where the whole adapting the prompt concept that I like to talk about comes into play. And I'm just gonna rerun this. The changes that I made, I basically was just more clear in how I referenced the examples of relevant stuff and irrelevant stuff. So I'm going to click continue, and I didn't retest this step actually. So retest the step. The other thing I look at too while it's doing this is what information did it include in its output. So Skool gave me a link, which is what I wanted. It included a summary, which is kind of nice, and why it matters. I don't believe I asked it to do that, but it's kind of nice. And include the date, which is good, which I want. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the structure of the output and what it included. I like how it broke it up into tools and relevant news. I don't really truly understand why it broke it up into stories and news. We'll see what it does again this next time, and then we might need to retweak it, but continue, retest the step. So now a new message is waiting for me. It should be over here. It is one new message. All right, so it did that. It removed the other stories. It kept the relevant stories here. And it even, if I'm not mistaken, included another tool that it didn't include the first time. Yeah, it included drip in this second one. And it's pretty relevant. So what I'm going to do with this now is I'm going to test this some more. I'm going to publish this and I'm going to test it some more. for right now, so that it's to keep it super easy to test the output, I'll keep it connected to Slack in this channel right now. But again, ultimately, it will probably be connected to in Zapier here, it'll be connected to a Google Doc. The other thing I want to look at, notice that relevance to AI and online businesses, application of AI, online business operations, search results, advertising, content creation, team communication. So that's really good insight into what it's using as its criteria. So I could take that, and it also used different criteria up here, leveraging AI for growth, innovation, operational efficiency. So if I'm looking at this and saying, oh, operational efficiency, I want to include that. So I could take this information here, flesh it out even a little bit more, and I could include that in the prompt. So again, I'm just taking what it's giving me. I'm pretty happy with this as it is right now. It's not 100% by any stretch. The goal here is to get it to about 90%, 95% if possible. Overall, pretty happy with what that was. But just remember, it all came from like where that's coming from is this right here is the prompt. And it just started with me describing what I want to happen. And there are different ways to, like there's certainly different ways to do this. I could have these emails sent into Notion. I could have them put into a Google Doc. I just wanted my goal is to look at this as simply as possible. And what is the shortest, what I think is most effective and simplest way to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish here. And it's like, well, we already have a filter set up in Gmail. Why not just use that? The emails are right there. Again, next step, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to give this a name. So I've just named it. I'm going to turn it on. Oh, I have to publish it first. It's now published, transfer existing data. Now you might be like, well, Rick, this just took you an hour and 15 minutes. That seems like a long time. Like, why don't you just read the emails? It took an hour and 15 minutes one time versus 2 hours every week. Like, this is the whole concept of quote passive income. Like you do it up front once and then it pays off. That's what this is. Like, yeah, it took an hour and 15 minutes, but I love doing this. But it also saves a ton of time going forward. So it just worked again. So it just came up. So 3 new messages. Let's just go to the bottom. So remember how we said most neuron readers think GPT is noticeably better than GPT-4? And I said they would probably pick that up, but we don't care about it because it's their own poll. It did. But again, I'm mostly judging it right now on what does it pick up and what does it not pick up? Because we can continue to tune this some more. It grabbed the Reddit here because I actually used that as an example of what I liked. However, it grabbed TikTok and the AI announcement from yesterday, which is good. I'm glad. Google DeepMind sharing tech that can add sound to AI video clips. Cool. I'm glad that it grabbed that, but I wouldn't use it. This latest version of Runway, I've been trying to think about whether that's something that I would want to share. Probably not. But again, I'd rather have the story to make a decision on and not have it. Pretty happy with what it's done, and we'll continue testing it. Just continue to refine it some more. Like I said, I don't think it's far off, which is great. It really wasn't that difficult to do. If you all aren't using the prompt generator that's in the lab, use it because as you can see, it works.